Ukraine today is taking responsibility for a brazen assassination just this morning. The dramatic and precise explosion in Moscow that killed a Russian general, the chief of the Russian army's chemical weapons division. He was accused of using prohibited chemical weapons against the Ukrainian military. It's Ukraine's most ambitious assassination since Russia's invasion began nearly 3 years ago. In that time, everyday life has been upended for the Ukrainian people. According to the Ukraine Children's Action Project, co-founded by our friend Dr. Irwin Redlener, an estimated 5 million Ukrainian children remain displaced or are now living abroad. This weekend, Dr. Redlener visited a children's hospital in Lviv, Ukraine, and a school in Poland where Ukrainian children have been able to continue their studies. Joining me now, Dr. Redlener, public health analyst and co-founder of the Ukraine Children's Action Project. Doctor, so good to see you. Tell us about your time in Ukraine this week.
Hi, Lisa. Yeah, it's been very intense. It's our 7th time coming to the country and trying to get a handle on what is happening with Ukraine's children. And unfortunately, the trauma that they are receiving from, psychologically as well as physically has been nonstop. And, from a pediatrician's point of view, it is very important that we find a way to get this war settled. In the meantime, other challenges remain, including getting medical care to children who are too close, living in communities too close to the front lines, dealing with the psychological trauma that so many kids are experiencing. And that's one of the reasons we keep coming back. We've been raising a great deal of money and trying to support programs that are helping children and families deal with educational disruption, psychological trauma, and other things. But yeah, it's pretty intense here, and yet the children, and we have seen a lot of kids who are very, very resilient. They're very positive about the future. They want to get on with their lives and careers, and they will be part of the restoration and recovery of this country once the war is over. But I have no doubt that Ukraine's cultural integrity, its academic and technological prowess will carry this democracy into the future as long as we don't let this nation get overrun by the Russians. This has been nonstop since February of 22, and it needs to stop.
About a decade ago, I did a reporting project that took me to Rwanda, to El Salvador, and to Jordan, looking at displaced children. And one of the things we talk often about the short-term impact to children, but there's also a long-term impact to these nation states, which is if there is a gap in education, who is it that goes back and rebuilds these countries? Talk to me sort of both about how you help these children get through the psychological trauma of what they have endured, of being displaced, but also making sure that that gap in education remains as small as possible.
Well, Alicia, you put your finger right on one of the major problems here that affects the present and the future of Ukraine. You have children who have not been in school regularly now for almost 3 years, not to mention the fact that many schools were closed. All the schools were closed really in Ukraine because of COVID before the war started. So we have children, we've seen 7, 8, 9 years old who have never been in a regular school situation. And we are working very closely. Karen Redlener, co-founder of UCAP, and I have been working very closely. In fact, we spoke with the Ministry of Education and spoke to the first deputy minister just this very evening. But the country needs to develop, with international help, long-term strategies to make up the lost educational trajectory that these kids are experiencing. And your point about what you've seen in other crisis zones remains true to this day. And, you have kids who are living through a war that's prolonged. They are going to suffer. And ultimately, the country where the war is will suffer, because the future, which requires educated, ready-to-go, motivated children, will suffer if education disruption, psychological trauma, and so on persists. It's a really, really bad problem. And ultimately, we're calling this the war generation here in Ukraine. And You know, it's really up to the adults in the room, which means the family of nations. Even though the world is chaotic now politically in the United States, in much of Europe, we have to get this war stopped in a way, by the way, that secures, Ukraine's democracy, that makes sure it is not subject to an invasion again.
Dr. Irwin Redlener, thank you so much, doctor, for being with us and for the work that you are doing. We're going to sneak in a quick break.